60% of Americans have at least one chronic disease that is related to chronic inflammation. 42% of Americans have diseases, more than one diseases, diabetes, cardiac issues, cardiovascular issues. When I look at the market and how the medical community is helping these patients, if there is chronic inflammation, then because of that, there is diabetes.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fit Vegan Podcast. Today, I have a very special guest that I had the opportunity to meet like a month and a half ago at NHA. I have Dr. Mobeen Syed, who is the CEO of Dr.Been Corp, a modern online medical education marketplace. Mobeen is a medical doctor and a software engineer. He graduated from the prestigious King Edward Medical University, Lahore. He has been teaching medicine since 1994. Mobeen is also a software engineer and an engineering leader. He also has a YouTube channel with over 647,000 subscribers where he educates people for free on how to improve their health. He's been labeled the world's best and free medical lectures to prepare you for medical exams. All right, welcome to the Fit Vegan Podcast. I'm your show host, Maxim Sigouin, and I'm the founder and CEO of Fit Vegan Coaching, a company that is on a mission to help 10,000 people get lean, thrive, and reduce their risk of chronic illnesses by 2033 and 1 million by 2050. I believe that having a fit, healthy body and mind is the foundation to living an incredible life. And this is what the show will give you if you choose to listen and implement. Enjoy the episode and have a great day. Dr. Mobeen, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, we excited to have you here. We met while we were waiting in line at the National Health Association conference. We were waiting for our food.
I remember.
Yeah, and it sparked up a great conversation. We stayed in touch, and I was like, you know what? It would be great to have him on a Fit Vegan Podcast because looking into your channel and what you're doing with your lectures, I think is awesome because a lot of people are looking for those studies. And so I would just love to kind of dive into a little bit of your background story as to what brought you to be the man that you are today. What brought you to want to dedicate your life to work in this space?
So, first of all, once again, thank you very much for having me. It was a blast being at the NHA, an eye-opener. This was my first exposure to that diet style and lifestyle, and it was impressive. And yes, it was fun meeting you over there. Thank you for having me again. Briefly, my older brother is a medical doctor. I am a medical doctor. And the very early on during my medical education, I used to just sit down with my friends and discuss things. And that is how my teaching passion developed. And then at some point, when we are younger, our elders, give us advice. One of the elders said that the best purpose of a human being is to serve others. Other things in the universe can be done by many others. So that stuck to me. And the second thing that happened was when I was in fourth year medicine, I actually decided to quit medicine because I was also doing engineering and medicine seemed very hard. Going to patients, looking at the patients was tedious for me at that time. So one of our seniors, he met me and he said, I heard that you're trying to quit. And I said, yes. And he said, why? And I said, it looks like it is a tedious job and I don't think I can do proper service. And he said, develop a feeling that you are like a mother and you have to take the pains like a mother to nurture your patients and to bring them back to health. And the second thing that he said was very interesting and it stuck to me. And he said, just like a doctor's negligence can shorten a person's life, similarly, a doctor's effort and struggle can increase a person's life as well. So he said, why don't you become someone who helps others and help them improve their health and increase their life? So with those few other messages as well, I decided to stay in and I made a purpose. So I think I was studying without a purpose. This was quite a hollow purpose to say doctors would serve, you know, others. And at the end
Yeah.
of the day, everybody talked about, how do we earn? What is my clinic going to look like? And so on. So that is how I started. So my purpose became from very early on that can I serve? And then I went into engineering as well. I did a lot of engineering work in various organizations here in the US. But my that little purpose kept staying with me. And finally, when I had enough resources, I started a startup with the name Dr.Been.com, Dr.Been Corp. And from that platform, I started teaching medicine. And if you look at my lectures or my teachings, that purpose always is there. I teach mechanisms. I teach so that people understand. May that be a nurse or a doctor or a patient or a lay person who is healthy, to understand the mechanisms that are happening in our body, then to be able to modulate them or to be aware of them to have a healthy life. So that is how I reached here. In the COVID time, there was a lot of misinformation in the early times. Drink tea or have steam and you'll be okay. And I thought that is going to hurt people. And so I started doing COVID lectures. It was not a deliberate attempt to say, let me go get audience. It was just a very sincere effort to offer mechanistic approaches to understanding COVID. And so since then, we have had 80 million views, 1 billion minutes watched, and here I am.
So wait, you started your YouTube channel at the beginning of COVID?
My channel was actually started in 2013. It was much
Okay.
before COVID. It's just that I used to teach medical doctors, medical students, nursing students, healthcare professionals. And during the COVID beginning, I switched. I spoke with my team and I said, I think that this is our opportunity to serve. And my team agreed. So we kind of switched towards COVID teaching and we kept it
Okay.
free. All COVID lectures are free of cost, sitting on YouTube. I think more than 1,600 lectures. And during this time, I studied about 10,000 studies. And out of those, I presented about 1,000 to 1,500. And I think I drew about 40,000 illustrations during this time to present these mechanisms.
Yeah, well, I think you did a great job with your lectures and your YouTube channel. You have definitely a lot of great, valuable content on there. So
Thank you.
basically, that was your path to serving. That was kind of your return
Yeah,
to medicine, was through educating people for free online.
correct. Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And then of course, we had drbeen.com as well, where we offer CMEs. And so that is
Yep.
for a fee. But for COVID, we just became entirely free.
Yeah. And so, what is the emphasis now that you're focusing
So
on?
that's a very good question. So, of course, luckily, fortunately, COVID is now ramped down. It has become endemic. It is still in our society, it still infects people, damages, unfortunately, the more at risk people. But generally, we have had our encounters with COVID and we are kind of on our path out of it. So, my next service that I'm doing is something that I'm really passionate about, and that is making people aware about inflammation, and
Mm.
especially subclinical and chronic inflammation. 60% of Americans have at least one chronic disease that is related to chronic inflammation. 42% of Americans have diseases, more than one diseases, that are related to chronic inflammation. For example, diabetes, cardiac issues, cardiovascular issues, angina, etc., strokes. And so the when I look at the market, how the pharma and how the medical community is helping these patients, I see that there is a lot of stress and innovation and research on the secondary outcomes. And that is, if there is chronic inflammation, then because of that, there is diabetes. We try to really handle diabetes instead of trying to figure out what's happening under the hood. And so
Yeah.
I want to make people aware that lifestyle changes, food changes, various habits, reduced stress, reduced pollutant exposure, etc., can really help us have better, healthier life without pharmaceutical intervention. And so that is my purpose at this time. I'm writing a book about this as well, chronic inflammation and how that affects us and how that increases the risk of cancers and diabetes and cardiovascular issues and so on. So that is the work I'm doing now.
So let's dive into that. Because I know before, when we spoke before, I was like, let's talk about cancer. And I think that's completely tied to it. So you mentioned, I think the word you said is subclinical inflammation
Yeah.
and then chronic inflammation. What is the difference between these two?
Very good question. So, inflammation is of many types. One is the acute inflammation, and that is when we are acutely exposed to something, some offending agent, that may be a virus, bacteria, fungus, or some pollutant or some agent. That is acute. Our body would bust up our immune system, which would go and attack and cause inflammation and help defend, resolve, repair. And that is all good.
Mm-hmm.
However, in many of us, as I said, 60% of Americans, in many of us, because of our food habit or our environment or our lifestyle, there is a continuous inflammatory state that is going on within us. In the early stages, we are not aware of it, there are no symptoms. And so that stage where inflammation is present, it is doing the damage, it is chipping away at our tissues, but we are not yet seeing any symptoms, is called subclinical inflammation. It is a continuous inflammation as well. It is chronic inflammation as well. However, it doesn't have symptoms yet. Then at some point, there appears a clinical horizon. In medical terms, we say that when somebody does not have symptoms, that is a disease that is happening, but not the patient is not aware. Then enough tissue damage occurs that at one point the symptoms start appearing. An example will be when people have coronary artery narrowing, they do not have any symptoms in the beginning. And so that is a subclinical state. And then
Yeah.
with a certain percentage of narrowing, they would start having symptoms. They would start having pain in the heart. And now that is clinical horizon. So once the inflammation, subclinical inflammation, reaches a point where clinical horizon occur, where the symptoms start appearing, or the secondary outcomes start appearing, for example, diabetes, cancers, cardiovascular issues, that will be called chronic inflammation.
So the buildup has to happen for quite a significant amount of time before it translates to, for example, diabetes.
Absolutely. The chronic inflammation probably start in us in subclinical stages from our young time. The only
Yeah,
thing
especially
is,
now.
correct, absolutely, absolutely, especially now, and especially after COVID, because we all got exposed to a very damaging virus. So, what happens is we get exposed to various offending agents. May these be in the food or in the environment or in our, because of our lifestyle, for example, not having enough sun or enough sleep or having chronic stress. All of those in the early ages do not show symptoms because our body is releasing growth hormones and is actively repairing and building. And so for younger ages, we don't even know that this is happening.
Yeah.
But as we age further and our body's automatic maintenance systems do not maintain our body the way they used to before, and we are not in a habit of maintaining our body because we are, cruising along thinking everything just happens,
Yeah.
then the chronic inflammation starts appearing.
So it's It's a decline of the body's ability to kind of handle the stress while also having the compounding effect of inflammation throughout your younger years, kind of building up into your later years, that most people think like, I've been fine for this long. Why is it showing up now? So it's like the compounding effect of a decade or two, 3 decades kind of accumulating.
Absolutely correct. And I'll give you another example. This room where I'm sitting down and I'm doing this talk with you. Imagine if I use this room every day and I start from a very clean room. Imagine this is a cell. And every time I use this, I throw some piece of trash on the floor. So the first day, there will be just one little paper sitting somewhere. The next day, there will be one more, and then one more, and then one more. Eventually, the trash, if I did not clean it up, would continue to go up and higher and start filling this cell. And it would start leading the cell to start malfunctioning. Plus, the cells have internal sensors to look inwards to see, are we in a bad state? If they are, the cells would respond by creating inflammation internally and outwardly. So when we are passing through time and our cells are operating every day, if we are not careful, these cells are getting filled with misshapen proteins, malformed proteins, proteins that are making tangles with each other that cannot be easily removed by the cell's cleaning system, or for the healthcare professionals listening, ubiquitination systems do not become active for the misshapen proteins. And the only way to correct them is through autophagic system, where the bigger blobs of systems that would clean that trash. But the problem is our lifestyle is such that autophagy does not kick in. So not only it is that our body's maintaining systems go down, for example, growth hormone, etc. And not only this, that we are now compounded in inflammation, our cells have become trash filled as well. I'm using that term more flexibly. For more healthcare professional level discussion will be, we have tangled proteins lying around in the cell causing malformation and malfunction of the cell. That is where we get in trouble.
So it made me think of the show Hoarders. Have you seen that show before? Where
Absolutely,
people just stack
yes.
stuff up.
Yeah.
So basically that's what our cells are doing throughout our lifetime if we're not cautious of the loading of garbage.
Absolutely. We actually force ourselves with the modern lifestyle, we force ourselves to become hoarders. Our cells are actually much more responsible than we as a bigger macro, organ. We are lesser responsible. Unfortunately, many of us, cells are more responsible. They would build something, they'll use it, they'll tear it down, recycle the material, and build something again. However, with the lifestyle of continuous stress, continuously eating, snacking, not allowing fasting time to ourselves, so to do autophagy, we force them to become hoarders. It is our fault, not their.
And so is that something that would play a role in causing mutation in the cells? That hoarding?
Absolutely. So the basic idea is very simple. And if somebody who's listening to this talk just wants to take one message out of this whole talk, that will be, whenever there is continuous turnout of the cells, whenever there is continuous replications or divisions of the cell, there is going to be chances of incorrect DNA formations. There will be chances of incorrect protein formations. There will be chances of errors in making new cells. If that frequency is higher, then that will mean chances of cancers, chances of malfunctioning tissues would increase. So that means we have to do everything to try to reduce chronic inflammation, which results in cell turnouts and cell divisions. So to connect it back to the previous topic, if you have a cell that is now filled with trash, that cell is going to start releasing interleukins and other chemicals to tell the surrounding cells that I'm in trouble, I need help. And what will happen is immune system cells would come over and trying to provide help, they would start dividing and proliferating and increasing in numbers. And similarly, the tissue cells can start dividing. And the result is there are errors, there are DNA damages, there are DNA damaged cells that continue to start proliferating. And result is we can have cancers and badly functioning tissues.
So I think there's two obvious questions that would follow that, which is what could we do to cleanse the cell to help it go back to, ultimately the ideal would be to its original state. And
Yeah.
what are things that we could do to not continue to load up the cell? But before I dive into that, because I know that that's probably going to bring us down a rabbit hole, I had a question from the beginning. You hear sometimes good inflammation and bad inflammation in the body, and it made me think of exercise just because I'm in the fitness space. They tell you not to take an ice bath after a hard workout because your body is producing inflammation to help with the recovery process. So is there such a thing as good inflammation and bad inflammation? And is there a benefit if there is a good inflammation post-workout to let it happen?
Absolutely. It's a very good question. And I'm happy that I had already talked about acute inflammation. Good inflammation is acute inflammation, an inflammation that occurs as a response to some area's need for defense and repair and resolutions, and then it goes away. It comes in, it helps. For example, in the case of exercises, when we train our body enough and when we exercise enough and cause little microscopic damages to our muscle cells, the muscle cells, there are stem cells that live in the muscles as well, which when they would see the inflammatory state as a result of that damage to the cells, they would make more muscle cells. Plus, they would strengthen the current muscle cells. They would even change the muscle heads in there from one type to another type that would endure better, depending upon what kind of an exercise you're doing. Are you doing resistance exercises or endurance? That means that inflammation, if you temper that down, then from the exercise, all you got was muscle damage and no chance of growing.
Yeah.
So you have to allow that inflammation to happen, and that would actually grow you. But that inflammation would occur when it is needed, do its job, help you become better, and then go away. Chronic inflammation or subclinical inflammation is which is unnecessary. Now, in there as well, there is a good chronic inflammation and there is a bad chronic inflammation. Good chronic inflammation will be, for example, let's say I have some pathogen that is living in me and it is just continuously attacking me and body is not able to get it out. And as a result, the body is producing inflammation to try to fight it and keep it at bay. So if there is no external help and we are not able to handle it, then at least the body is fighting it. That is good inflammation. Although over a longer period of time, it would cause tissue damage as well.
Yeah.
But the purpose of the inflammation was good. There is a bad chronic or subclinical inflammation where there is no need to have inflammation. There is no pathogen sitting there. There is no cancer cell developing there. There is no offending agent present there to fight with. But the body is still just producing inflammation. That is going to be a bad inflammation.
And so I think that's going to tie to the previous 2 points of like how do we clean the cell and how do we sustain it not being a hoarder again. I feel like that would tie in with that chronic inflammation piece. So the first step is how would people go about doing more of a cleansing of the cell? The first thing that comes to mind is kind of that fasting, that autophagy process.
Yeah.
Is that one of them?
Absolutely. That is it. Bingo. So here is a couple of things to do. One is, imagine that you buy a old beaten up house. What are you going to do with it? Number one, you would decide to take care of the current state. And number two, you would decide to maintain it better in the future. Mm-hmm. So we have to have the same two mindsets. Imagine we are 40 or 50 or whatever our age is. we are now receiving our body once again in a bad state. Now, the two things that need to be done is, number one, we have to agree with ourselves that maintaining it is going to be my responsibility, that automatic maintenance is not available. So this is a huge mind shift. People
Yeah.
resist this a lot. They say, well, it was all working fine. It would continue to work fine. So
Yeah. A
that's
lot of
why.
our clients are like 60, 70, and 80. That's what they tell me. They're
Yeah.
like, hey, when I was 30, everything was
Yeah.
working great.
Yeah. And the second, so this is a mind shift change. We have to put an effort on us. We have to do the oil change in this car now. We have to clean it up with our hands now. And the second thing is, whatever trash is already there, we have to clear it out as much as we can, so that when we start maintaining our body, we start from a clean, pristine state. And
Mm-hmm.
for that, of course, cleaning up our food, cleaning up our lifestyle, making as our environment as healthy as possible, taking better sleep, having less stress, all of that is important. But the most important thing to start cleaning the cells is intermittent fasting, or any method to trigger autophagy. And a little more technical detail here. Our cells have two ways of cleaning the raw material that they have shapen into some functional areas, proteins. One is ubiquitination. Ubiquitination is a process of recycling something that we are familiar with, the cell is familiar with. So imagine if I show you this, you would say it's a pen.
Yeah.
So imagine if you are a recycler and I show this to you, your need is, if I can know what it is, then I would recycle it. If I do not know what it is, I'm not going to recycle it. That is the promise of the ubiquitination system. So if I give a microtubules are small pipes within the cell that are functioning as roads. If I give it a ubiquitinating protein, a microtubule, and I say, can you please recycle it? It would say, yeah, happily. I understand it's a microtubule. I know what to do with it. On the other hand, if we have a tangled, misshapen, imagine it is the same pen, but now I have kind of mushed it up. Why and how? Imagine I ate some bad food that caused enough reactive oxygen species production that they attacked this pen everywhere and created this tangled mess. Now, when I show it to you and I say, this is a pen, can you please recycle it? You would say, no, I don't think it's a pen. I do not think I can recycle it. Now,
Mm.
this trash is going to sit in the cell and more trash would tangle with it. For this to be cleared out, we need a more robust system, which is called autophagy. Problem is, autophagic mechanisms do not operate on their own all the time. They need special circumstances to work. And those circumstances is or are that when cell starves. If you starve, for example, if I starve as a whole, as a bigger animal, human, what will I do? I'll start looking around the food that is at home in the fridge somewhere, right? Or my fats would start getting used and my muscles would start getting used. Similarly, our cells do the same thing. They start looking inward to say, do I have anything that I can recycle and use? And guess what do? They activate autophagic systems. So autophagic system is not always available. It only becomes activated when the cell is under the need of nutrition and it doesn't have it from the environment. Then it goes and creates little blobs that would pinch away those little tangles and break them down and use them. That means we can't, with our lifestyle of morning breakfast, then a snack before the lunch, then another snack, then dinner, then before sleeping another thing, that would never allow autophagy to start. That means our cells would never clean up. Now, there are some people who cannot do fasting for whatever health reasons or other reasons. They can simply take various molecules or foods that could help them trigger autophagy. So this is the way to put yourself back into a clean state. Somebody was interviewing me a few days ago and said, if people could manage their chronic inflammation, what will happen? And I said, you would have 80 years old, 90 years old, living and operating as if they were 30 or 40 years old or 50 years old. Their brain will be sharp, their bodies will be sharp, they will be active, and they'll be happy. There'll be less chronic inflammation, there'll be less diabetes, there'll be less heart attacks, there'll be less cancers. Just by better control over the food and giving some jolts of fasting to ourselves.
So I love that analogy. So autophagy is basically you when you're starving. You're going to the back of the fridge, you're looking in the back of the covers, you're trying to find something to eat or snack on. So how long does it take to get into that state of autophagy? Because I've heard mixed timelines on it. Some people are saying, oh, if you just fast for 6 hours. Some people are like, no, you need to do at least 3 or 4 days. So what have you found to be the best when it terms of like for the autophagy to actually kick in?
So you are now talking about the holy grail of autophagy discussion. Most of the autophagy studies that you can Google autophagy study or chronic inflammatory state in autophagy studies, and you'll see most of the studies are done on animal models. And it makes sense. You can't go to a human being and say, I want you to starve for 4 days because I want to see what's going on in your body. And the human would say, come on, go away. So most of the studies have been, let's say, on mice or other animals, or taking our tissue cells, culturing them outside and then starving them. So in vitro studies. Mm-hmm. The animal studies have mostly been done where they kept the animals starving for a couple of days. Because of that, majority of the evidence that is present out there says that maximum peak autophagy occurs at 48 hours of fasting. And that became the general, wisdom in the system that autophagy needs 48 hours or more of starving. There is another team of doctors. I forgot her name. I actually reached out to her to have her on my show, and I could not get a response. I forgot her name. She's a very, very prolific researcher with her team here in some university in the US. Her team and they try to answer this question. And here are her observations or what they found. Number one, the autophagy is triggered in various windows of time, but the type of autophagy is different. So there is a macro autophagy and there is a micro autophagy. So what happens is when we start starving within 2 hours after the meal, we still trigger some autophagy. It is not as prevalent in the body. It is not as intense in the body. And it is tiny bit of autophagic vacuoles working on some, munching away some of the trash. Mm-hmm. Clearly, that is not sufficient enough. Otherwise, we all starve. I'm using the starve as a flexible term here. Otherwise, starvation has a definition. We all starve from one meal to the other meal. Couple of hours, the food is there, and then we starve for 2-3 hours, and then the next meal. Clearly, that is not sufficient autophagy because it doesn't keep us clear. But if that was not happening, maybe we would all have been in an even worse state of health. Then, after 8 hours, there starts the macro autophagy or chaperone-mediated autophagy. And you can Google chaperone-mediated autophagy, and I think her studies will show up. Chaperone-mediated autophagy is a very interesting mechanism. So imagine if I'm starving for 8 hours. Our body, our cells, have internal sensors, they have external sensors. They're trying to see if I have nutrients available around me and I have anything stressing inside. So when the cell sees that I do not see enough nutrients around me, I'm going to be really in a bad shape. That cell would activate what we say heat shock proteins. It's a new, it's a enzymatic system that is usually not available. I give the example of a fire brigade or a fire truck. So a fire truck does not just keep running around in the town uselessly and just honking its horns and on the roads. It's usually just parked away. And then when there is a fire, then the truck comes out and it is doing all the things that it needs to and goes and puts out the fire. Our cell doesn't have enough spaces to park the fire trucks. So what happens is when the cell is under stress and it notices that I'm going to be in trouble, it then starts making heat shock proteins. Why are they called heat shock proteins? Because the very first time these proteins were noticed was by when the scientists were working on some cells and they heat them. And when the cells became heated, a new set of proteins appeared in the cell, which were not present when the cell was not heated. So these proteins started clearing out the cell and they started recycling the trash products. And they said, well, that is a heat shock protein. This is a protein that came into existence to help the cell handle the shock of this heat. It turned out later on that in any stressed state, the cell makes heat shock proteins to help it. These heat shock proteins, for example, HS70, heat shock protein HSP70, these heat shock proteins, when our cell is starving for 8 hours, will come into existence. How? Because the nucleus, the genes would open up, they'll make a mRNA to go make HSP70, and so there will be new HSP70 enzymes built. These HSP70 enzymes will then go and pull from this trash, this tangled mess of proteins, pull pieces out of it, bring them to the recycling mechanisms, endosomes. I call them threshers of the cell. Bring them to the recycling mechanism, get those things recycled in the hope of finding some energy and nutrients and amino acids to be used for the cell's function, because the cell is about to go under stress. Right? So this is like if you said, hurricane is coming, what would you do? You'll go and store food and find things and, put various defenses. Yeah. Heat shock protein's job is to recycle the trash to produce new pristine molecules that can be used for energy when the cell is under stress. That happens at 8 hours. In the brain, the story is slightly different. And this is why we are getting so much dementia nowadays, because the brain's neurons only start cleaning themselves up if they are starving for 14 hours and if the 14th hour of fast appears when we are sleeping. So you tell me how many times have we been found sleeping at the 14th hour of a fasting state? Very few.
Rarely.
Right? So if that does not happen, then the brain does not get a chance to clean up its neurons. That means neurons and the environment around the neurons start getting filled with those tangled messes, which would then cause the dementias and Alzheimer's and other things. What is the solution for that? Allow autophagy to occur for brain as well. So maybe sometimes a longer fast where the 14th hour of the fast appears in the sleep, and maybe sometimes shorter fasts where general body is cleaned out, but at least 8 hours or more. And it is actually easy to do 8 hours or more because we sleep for 6-7 hours, right?
Yeah. You finish dinner and you wake up the next day and you're pretty much there. Yeah. So few questions. Once the process of autophagy starts, how long does it take to cleanse the cell in the body? Like how long once you get to that point, how long do you have to stay in it to really kind of clean out the system?
That's a very interesting question. There is very less evidence. However, there are certain studies that can give you an idea of how quickly this can help. And I would now refer to Dr. Jason Fung's studies. Jason is big on intermittent fasting. In one of his studies, there were individuals who were insulin dependent diabetics for, I believe, 20 years or more. So imagine somebody insulin dependent 20 years or more. Jason started them on intermittent fasting. Jason and team, the ones who are doing this research.
Yeah.
The indicator that autophagy is working and it is cleaning up the cells and cells are now getting back to their normal function appeared within 3 weeks. The patient had left insulin usage.
Wow.
Right? So from that, we can extrapolate that 3 weeks, 4 weeks is sufficient time to clean sufficiently, if not all of it, to allow the cell to get back towards normal function. Or maybe if we are 60 years of age, then clean it enough to become 40 again for the cell,
Yeah.
to leave insulin again, right? So there is no evidence that I have seen. It may be that the evidence is there and I've not just seen those studies. I haven't seen the evidence to say within 8 hours this much of the trash will be picked up. But I have seen other studies that put people on intermittent fasting and autophagic route, and they have results, good results within 3-4 weeks.
And so just to clarify, that means that they're fasting for a certain period of time, but they're still consuming food on a daily basis for 3 weeks. It's not that they're like doing a water fast for 3 weeks.
No, not at
Oh,
all.
okay.
Actually, in Jason's study, you can actually find that study online and see his food design. I think it was a dinner time food. He had cut a lot of carbs, and the food was given every day. And I think it was once a day.
Okay.
And
It's like a one
that
meal
is how,
day.
yeah.
Okay.
So once or twice a day with appropriate food components and with the fasting for the remaining time.
And is there a way to scientifically track the cleanliness of your cells? Is there like a way to measure that?
So I do not think that we have any studies, in vivo studies of human beings to say this person is starving or fasting, and
Yeah.
how much of the, can we take biopsies of his tissues to see how much trash was there and how much has gone. I have not seen those studies, but symptomatic outcomes have been
Yeah.
measured with intermittent fasting.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned heat shock protein earlier that would be one of the mechanisms that would kick in when the body's under that state of stress to kind of start to, correct me if I'm wrong, kind of dismantled the crooked pen to be able to recycle it. And so is that why when people say to do a sauna or an ice bath, or when you exercise and you put yourself in a state of controlled stress, that it helps to release toxin and that there's all these health benefits? Would that be why?
Absolutely. So I am so happy that you're already kind of on top of these kind of concepts. So yes, sauna or heat, there are goods and there are bads of heat. Sauna is a good heat. What happens is in sauna, we activate heat shock proteins in addition to all the other, the sweating and the dehydration that is produced. In addition to all of that, we activate heat shock proteins. Heat shock proteins, by their nature, always attack the trash in the cells, the tangled proteins. Why? Because imagine you and I are heat shock proteins. And here is a house which is locked down, which thinks there is not going to be any more food coming in, and there is a stress that is happening. And you and I, our job is to prepare the cell to defend itself or to survive. We are going to run around, look in the fridge, look in the freezer, look at the things, what can we eat, what can we not eat, if there is anything that we can recycle and start eating, etc. So heat shock proteins' job is, by nature of them, is to pile up, recycle the older trash and pile up neat new raw material to be used when the cell is actually under stress. So whenever you heat it with sauna, Heat shock protein will come into existence, will become made. And whenever it is made, it has its natural tendency to go and start chewing away at the trash, and that would help. This is why I have heard so many people anecdotally who use sauna at later ages that they say we feel so much better and younger.
Would it be the same for cold exposure? So doing an ice bath, you wouldn't be heating it up, but you'd be putting in a state of controlled stress.
Correct. So, one, there is a stress, and the stress always produces heat shock proteins, although we call them heat shock proteins, but any stress on the cell, may that be because of temperature, or may that be because of starvation, or may that be because of some other mechanical shearing effects. Any stress in the cell produces heat shock proteins. It's kind of
Mhm.
a misnomer that they are heat shock. It's only because they were found very first time when the cells were heated. So yes, in the cold stress as well, the heat shock proteins will be produced and they would start doing this. The second thing is the cold has its own mechanisms for benefit, and heat has its own mechanisms. And unfortunately, we do not educate our youngsters at the school or college level to understand these mechanisms. Many of our doctors are not fully aware of this as well. Is as well, excuse me. Some are actually really sharp on these things. What happens is there are two ways to look at our body's state from inflammation point of view. Sometimes we want inflammation, like you gave an example after an exercise. So maybe there is an infection and we want inflammation. In such
Mhm.
cases, we need heat to be applied, because heat would not only produce heat shock proteins, but heat would dilate the blood vessels. This is why when we go out in the hot temperature, we start blushing and we start becoming red, because the blood vessels are dilated and more blood start circulating in the tissues, including the skin, to kind of create evaporation. That extra blood that is going to a tissue can bring in more nutrients, wash away more of the acidic things and other waste products. So in certain cases, putting heat or creating adding heat to our body is actually useful. In other cases, imagine that somebody has joint pains because there is unnecessary chronic inflammatory state going on, which causes a lot of immune cells to come in and attack the joints. In such cases, when they cool them, that would cause vasoconstriction. It would take away energy from the cells to do their metabolism fast enough to do attack on the cells. And it would then allow the heat shock proteins to start cleaning up those cells. And so in such cases, cold would actually become very helpful to reduce inflammation and to clear cells.
So it's beautiful. So you basically can get that reduction of inflammation from the heat and from the cold.
Correct?
Yeah.
Correct. Different mechanisms, but yes. And of
Yeah.
course, you can also cause inflammation by these things. For example, if you expose some body tissue for uh, to cold for a longer time, that tissue is going to get damaged.
Yeah.
Similarly, if you expose your body to heat for a longer time, then the damage would start occurring. Where you go to beach and you lie down there without sunscreen, your skin is going to start peeling off. So
Yeah.
in the correct balances, these both are very useful. It's
Yeah.
just that the when are they indicated is different.
Yeah. And so we covered how to cleanse the cell. And so I'd love to talk about not that the cell is cleaned, how to keep it clean after. And I just want to preface that I don't know for you, but I've been noticing a trend online and with myself and people close to me that there's been a shift to kind of reverting back in time. Like people, I bought a dumb phone so that there's no social media or things on there. Going back to writing on pen and paper. A lot of people are simplifying their life to kind of step away from the hecticness of life, and I feel that people are tired of the busy life, which I know could be causing a lot of inflammation. And so I'm curious through your findings, like what are some of the things that people can do to kind of keep those cells clean so that they don't have to do a massive cleanse, every year. or every week or so?
Absolutely. So very, very good points that you're raising. First and foremost is the intermittent fasting, because that triggers the mechanisms that do autophagy. So that's one. Then, as we are now maintaining our body, it is important to reduce inflammation. So I always go to fundamentals, because when you start from fundamentals, you understand what to do.
Yeah.
It is important to reduce inflammation. Now, to reduce inflammation, there are many factors that would help. For example, as you said, the stressful life that we have developed with our phones and with our dings everywhere. I was surprised that my phone now gives me 2 dings per one text. It's a setting somewhere that I have turned on, or was by default turned on. And I was cracking up that I don't even want 1 ding, and now it is giving me 2. So the social media, the continuous engagement outwardly, actually makes us lonely, and that creates stress. It makes us competitive. That makes us stressed. It makes us feel bad sometimes that this person has this and I do not have this, and that creates stress. So our lifestyle has made us very alone in terms of connecting with ourselves. Whenever we are connecting outwardly, that is a time we are not spending with ourselves and thinking and figuring out things. And that means we are not connected actually. So that causes steroid hormones or stress hormones to be released. Stress hormones have a natural behavior of creating inflammation, or reducing blood supply to some tissues, increasing blood supply to other tissues, activating the immune system to kind of prepare the body for the stress. Imagine, because of our lifestyle, we put our body in a state of continuous stress, which results in inflammation. Once we put our body in a continuous state of inflammation, that would then result in diabetes, cardiovascular issues, and all other arthritises and fatigues and so on, cognitive declines. So when we simplify our life, that actually reduces that outward connection that bothers us. People actually think that it would be fun to watch things and see others. It actually makes us alone and stressed. So that is one. Second is, I'm going to give actually evidence of a study. So in Japan, you can actually Google this study. If you said forest bathing, Japanese study, you'll find this study. In Japan, what they did was they had 2 groups of people, similar in their age, sex, and the other variables, and they asked them to relax. And they sent one half of them to forest to have picnic in the forest, to live there for a week or two. And the other half, they gave them money to say, you go to the Tokyo city and you have party and you go to clubs and you just relax and have fun. When both groups came back, they found out that people who were in the forest, they had more active natural killer cells and lesser stress hormones, significantly different from the other relaxing group that was relaxing in the city.
Mm-hmm.
They both were relaxing. They both groups were off. They both had ample money for the city, that they did not worry about how would I relax and how do I pay for all this. And it turned out that when they were connecting more with nature, the forest, the oils that are released by the trees had an effect on reducing the stress hormones and on activating the good parts of the immune system. So you are absolutely correct. This is why I always ask people that, hey, if you cannot go to forest or you cannot go in a park for a walk, then have those essential oils or something that is available for your body to, have them, know that they are there and relax. But this is just one part of it. Better food. I was talking with my wife this morning, and I was saying that, hey, yesterday I discussed fried foods and their impact, negative impact. So there are a few studies that I was discussing yesterday with a group of people. There is a study that showed that fried foods increase the risk of cardiovascular incidence of actually not risk incidence of cardiovascular disease by 21%. And there is another study that showed that French fries and potato chips increase, other type of potatoes too, increase the risk of coronary artery disease by 16%. So of course we started this discussion that how come fried food cause inflammation, then cause coronary artery disease? And the mechanism is that when we are frying, not only there are bad oils and burnt oils and all that and their effect, excuse me, when we are frying, we are actually taking a food particle, or maybe this, let's say this is a potato, and there are two proteins in potato. When you fry, you weld them. So because we give energy to the system, and so the proteins start welding together, and we get polymerized product in the fried food, polymerized tangled proteins. Well, we are already trying to get rid of tangled protein. Imagine you start eating more tangled proteins.
Yeah.
Then frying process imparts oxygen, high energy molecules to the food product plus hydrogen. These become reactive species when they get into our tissue, and they start causing inflammation. On top of that, if we have carbohydrates as well, then I said to my wife I said, imagine there is fireworks happening everywhere in the cells because they're using these new products, and these are reactive oxygen species, and there is fireworks going on everywhere. That would cause generalized inflammation. So the point is, there are so many factors in our current lifestyle that contribute to the chronic inflammation. So for our maintenance of our health, we have to make sure our environment is good, our habits are good, our food is good, our body gets a chance to clean itself every so often, maybe fasting once or twice a week, maybe fasting once or twice a month, whatever we can do, removing the snacks from the food, giving enough time between the meals for the autophagy to work, giving at least 8-10 hours of a time between two meals, maybe including the night time, to create autophagy. These would help.
How I feel like a lot of people's stressor is, yes, social media is a big one. I think work has become a blurred line for a lot of people because, you know, you work from home. A lot of people work from the computer, and it's like in their living room, and there's no boundaries anymore. And so what are pieces of advice usually that you, when you talk to people to, I don't say live a simpler life, but to reduce that level of stress?
So this is a very interesting topic, and I've been thinking about this a lot. People actually feel happy that we are working remotely, but remote work has added another layer of capture on our time and attention, because now we are always working. We, as you said, the boundaries have blurred, and so that extra stress that has appeared now, we'll see the effects of that another few years down the road. Where inflammation that is occurring because of these new stresses would start taking its toll and has chipped away enough on our tissues that we'll see the outcome. So I have no good suggestion for how to handle the workplace stresses which have now come into our home. What I have tried to do is, and I went through these as well when I was younger, and I did not know what to do. Nowadays, I have made rules. For example, over a weekend, I am not going to look at any emails or anything that I know would have something that's going to trigger me, right? Or I would not go to my inbox and try, right? Or I'm not going to go to my inbox and pull the mails out of there because there would be something that is going to trigger me. So I deliberately clean myself. And what I tell myself, I heard it from somewhere and it really vibed with me, was, how about if you wake up in the morning, imagine your brain is a car's engine, you wake up in the morning and you throw sand in it. How would that work? That not great. Brain is right, not great, right? So I try to make sure that I do not throw sand in it until I'm ready for it. So when I know that I'm going to see this email, this one, and somebody is yelling at me or somebody is going to say something here that is going to trigger me and create a state in my mind and then inflammation, I just put that away. I prepare myself. Maybe sit with my family beforehand to create some more happy vibes before I look at those things. But you have to clean yourself from
Yeah.
those things that are triggers. There are still uncontrollable, unexpected triggers. We can't do much. I mean, if somebody lives in a polluted city, what are they going to do other than moving away from it? So they can't control it. But you can control many of your daily routine things. Do not look at a bad email at night. You're going to spend a disturbed night. You would not have correct sleep. That would cause, cognitive issues. That would cause inflammation. Don't look at it at night. See it in the morning. Don't pick up the mail when you think that I want to have a good day today. So you have to deliberately maintain yourself.
Yeah. And don't be an entrepreneur. Don't work for yourself because
Well, yeah.
you want high levels of stress. You see one bad email, you're like, damn, the whole day is going to be rough now.
Yes.
No, I do the same. I don't look at emails until I get to 1 p.m. typically. I shut off my phone at 5. My wife and I take 1 week of digital detox every 2 months. So we go on
Very nice.
vacation, we go in the woods, we make sure that we're in nature. My whole company has a 3-day weekend once a month.
Very nice.
Paid vacation just so that they can disconnect, go into nature. But I love what you said about the stressors of working from home. Everyone wanted that freedom back to work from home. But I think there's an important element of working in person, which was the connection with other people.
Yeah.
And you going out of your house to actually get some fresh air, even if it's just to walk to your car, to drive with the window open versus staying in a room for 8 to 9 hours a day.
We have made a bad bargain by
Yeah, for
saying
sure.
we always want to do remote. There are some folks who are going to be really happy with the remote. Maybe their environment in the office is not as good, or maybe the environment, physical environment and the social environment. But the other aspects of deterioration that are coming with the remote work are not the best. And I think companies who are now offering more and more remote work, they have to take deliberate actions to make sure that their teams have those boundaries available and that expectation is there, plus how to give them a healthier lifestyle when they're working remotely.
Yeah. I feel like people work more from home because they're trying to justify that they are working because no one can see them. So people end up working more and stressing more than if they were in the office and their boss could or their manager can visually see them work.
And I have actually a solution for my team, because I worked in engineering for a very long time and there is always a stress of continue to build. So what I have done with my team is, whenever they take some work, I sit down with them and I say, this is the total work that is in front of us. How much can be done in this week? When they say we'll take this much, then I do not expect more from them. And I say, you do it at night or at day or whenever you like, but this is all I'm expecting. And I'm not expecting lesser than it, and I'm not expecting more than it. So they know that I have this clarity.
Yeah.
The other teams, other companies where the work just keeps piling on and there is always such a huge pile that they have to work through that, and now they're working from home and they're working day and night and weekends, that is just unhealthy.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I tell them, if you're good at what you do and you're done in 3 hours instead of 8, go to the beach, hey,
Yeah, more
why would you
power to
be
you. Have
punished?
fun.
Yeah. Why
Yeah,
would you be punished for being efficient? It doesn't make sense.
correct.
And
Correct.
I think it kind of
I
relieves
actually
the
tell my
stress.
team, go use ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever. You
Yeah.
can accelerate your work. You promise me I'll do these things in 3 days. I don't care. You do it in half day. I'm very happy for you, remaining part of your days to be open for you.
Yeah. I wish I worked for myself back in the day. It would have been less stressful.
Yeah, I'm also thinking of working for yourself at this time, all with all those good
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. So awesome. Well, I appreciate you going in depth and talking about inflammation. When we first started, I was like, we're going to talk about cancer, but you're right. That is just kind of a side effect of, obviously there's a lot more to cancer, but inflammation is plays such a key role in all those
Yeah,
chronic illnesses. And it's something that is very much so in our control to a certain extent,
correct,
depending on
correct.
the type of life you choose to live. Just
Right.
entrepreneurship versus employee, you're
Yeah,
consciously choosing to have more stress, which is okay.
correct,
But there's different ways to kind of offset that.
correct.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, so anything that we didn't talk about inflammation that you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap it up?
Absolutely. So, first of all, we'll sit down again for cancers and
Yeah,
diabetes and those. We'll do a series if you like. For for today's topics, everyone should do two or three things that I think are really, really important. Number one, get your high sensitivity CRP levels and get your interleukin 6 levels. These are good indicators of how much inflammation is going on. But
mm,
once again, a spot in time is not sufficient knowledge, because maybe there is a state in our body that needs inflammation and our body is producing it, rightfully so, correctly so, and we don't need to be worried about it. So HSCRP and interleukin 6 or IL-6 should be done more regularly. And the more worried or more risk you have to your health, the more often you should do this, just to see what is the trend of it. So this trend should be under everyone's belt to understand what is their body's inflammatory state. That is one. And the second one, I'm a big proponent of this. Luckily, somebody shared with me yesterday that FDA has now approved over-the-counter continuous glucose monitors. Glucose, carbohydrates, are a huge problem for inflammatory states and then all the other offshoot diseases. Continuous glucose monitors are such a blessing, and it should be for every healthy individual. I was dreaming with someone yesterday that ideally the whole US, at least for 1 month, should be given continuous glucose monitors. They buy it from their pocket or their insurances give it, doesn't matter. So they can see for their lifestyle what kind of glucose spikes they're causing, and
yeah.
then allow them to adjust them. So these are two, three things that I am a big proponent of. In addition to that, one, I'm writing the book about it. So hopefully when that comes out in next 3, 4 months, you would buy it. It is about chronic inflammations and the inflammatory pathways that operate and how to handle them with lifestyle, with food, with supplements, if you believe in supplements, etc. So keep an eye more than on the immune system and inflammation. Keep an eye or read up on inflammatory pathways. If you start making yourself aware of TLR, NLRP, nuclear factor kappa B, JAK-STAT, IP3, arachidonic acid, hypoxia-induced factor, and another few pathways. If you become aware of those pathways and how various foods and lifestyles trigger them, then you would be in a very, very good position to just manage your own state and stay healthy and sharp and active.
That's perfect. Yeah, we'll have you back on to promote your book when you're ready to
Absolutely.
launch it. I actually thought of one last question for you,
Please.
and I feel like it'll be a long answer, but you can let me know if you want to answer it. So I have a background in caregiving because I lost my late partner to breast cancer after caring for her for 5 years. A lot of the people that we help in our transformation program, in our body recomposition program, a lot of them are caregivers. So they're caring for an elder parent or a partner or their son, whatever it may be. What I found for myself is when I was caregiving, I was on high alert all the time. I can imagine my inflammation was through the roof for the whole of 5 years. And then when she passed away, I just crashed. And it honestly, it's been 3.5 years now, and I'm just starting to recover in terms of like energy. And so, how can people deal with inflammation when they are in that state where they have to show up, where they have to care for someone? How can people navigate that? Because since we have a lot of them in a program, I can hear them asking the question, like, I'm in this specific situation where I can't live this low stress lifestyle.
Yeah, so it's a very good question, and probably we can write a complete article on how to handle this. So I'll give some brief ideas. Of
Yeah.
course, the very first one is to disengage a little bit so you are able to relax. But I know these situations sometimes do not allow you to relax. There is an emotional involvement, and there is a feeling of responsibility which is ticking every single minute. And you do not want to miss on something that is needed and you didn't do it. I have a friend who was giving care to his ill father, and it went on for 8 years before he passed away. But in that 8 year, his that friend is my age. He looks 10 years older than me when you meet him now, just
Yeah.
because of the stress he took in those 8 years. He used to carry his father and take him to hospitals. So the second thing is, use those apps that can help you relax. I believe Calm app is a very good one that helps relax. So breathing techniques, relaxing techniques are very important. The another very important factor or thing that can be done, I have to demonstrate something, so I took my glasses off, is that sometimes just massage your temples. Don't do this too hard, but just massages. The benefit of that is that when there is some pressure here, one can do that here as well, but only one side of the angle of jaw, not both, because one can become unconscious. So I would rather just have massage your temples. That increases the feeling of pressure in the brain for a second, and the brain then helps reduce the blood pressures.
Mm.
So keep your blood pressure low by helping. Then sometimes do this with this right hand on the left side and do this from here, the sternocleidomastoid muscle, on top of it from under the ear all the way down, like a milking movement, and do it for both of this. What that does is it allows the lymphatic system of the brain to drain faster and causes the brain to stay sharp and less stressed. You can also do movement like this. This is called spinal pump,
Mm-hmm.
back and forth and side to side. That also moves the cerebrospinal fluid inside the brain spinal cord, and moves the whole CSF in the brain and causes the brain to be cleaned out a little more, which then creates mood stabilization as well. So, thirdly, I am a strong believer, and this may not actually fit very well with your audience. I'm a strong believer that if we are not able to have a lifestyle choice in a way to help us, then allopathic health can be taken. So, if inflammation is too much, if the stress is causing muscle fatigues and muscle aches and pains and the joint aches and pains or cognitive declines, then take anti-inflammatory with your doctor's advice.
Mm-hmm.
If you believe in supplements, then take some supplements, for example, curcumin, ECGC, boswellia, omega-3s, etc. If you
Yeah.
believe in food-based items, then take those foods that would trigger or would provide curcumin. EGCG is what? It is an
Green
extract of
tea.
the green tea, right?
Yeah.
So there are certain anti-inflammatory molecules. Resveratrol is one of them. EGCG is one of them. Curcumin is one of them. Omega-3 is one of them. NAC, N-acetylcysteine, and you can find them all in the foods. Take them to provide some extra help to your body to relax. Then, last thing, light. Near infrared light, and this is a complete topic. We can have a discussion for 2 hours to talk about how light helps.
Yeah.
Near infrared light can penetrate 4 inches in our body. That means if you have a near infrared lamp trained in the skull, it would actually penetrate all the way to the brain tissue. Or morning walk an evening walk allows more near infrared light to enter our body compared to midday walk where it is more thermal light that enters our body. Near infrared light causes the electron transport change, the mitochondrial electron transport chain, to work better and improves mitochondrial health that reduces inflammation.
Would that be the
So
red
please,
light machines?
correct. So there are a
Okay.
couple of type of red light machines. There are those that have thermal lamps in them that cause heat. And
Okay.
then there are near infrared lights. They do not cause heat. You can't even see them. But what they do is they provide near infrared light. Near infrared light, more on a technical side, if a healthcare professional is hearing, near infrared light causes the complex 4 of the electron transport chain to become activated and start picking up photons and working with the ATP synthase to produce ATP. So a sick, ill mitochondria that is becoming a reason for inflammation because of the stresses that we have. When you give it near infrared light, the whole chain doesn't need to restart. Just the last 2 parts would start working and you'll start becoming healthy. So these are a few
Beautiful.
things that one can then forest bathing, of course. And if they cannot go out for forest bathing, then have those essential oils in the form of candles, or there are, electronic plugs, and have those as well. They would relax a lot.
Beautiful. I appreciate you sharing that. I know it's going to be very valuable for the listeners. So, Dr. Mobeen, massive thank you for taking the time. This was a beautiful conversation. I'm happy it went that direction. I've learned a lot throughout it, and I'm excited to have you back when your book is ready to launch. And for everyone listening, if you have any questions for Dr. Mobeen, I will put all of his links in the description below. So his YouTube channel, his website, his Instagram, so you can go show him some love, some support, and ask him your questions. And yeah, any last words of wisdom, Doctor, that you'd like to pass off?
That's it.
Oh,
Number one, thank you very much for having me. And number two, please, please, please control your chronic and subclinical inflammations. Know your HSCRP levels and IL-6 levels, then have a plan to maintain your body. That's it. You will not get sick, or you'll be very minimally sick. And so please take care of yourself.
beautiful. Everyone, thank you very much for listening, and we will see you in the next episode. Bye bye.
Excellent. Bye bye.